The 2024 NBA draft looks like it's gonna be a good one for guards. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break it down. Let's kick things off with USC point guard Isaiah Collier, who I currently have as my top player in my preseason big board. Collier, who played for Wheeler High in Georgia last season, is a dynamic, explosive playmaker that's impossible to contain when he gets downhill. The Trojans' lead guard has an incredibly powerful first step that he leverages just about every time he's on the ball. Once Collier gets the step on his defender, it's game over. He can then combine his quickness with a reactive handle and a grown man's thick frame that is already close to NBA ready. Once he's in the league next season, this is going to be really apparent in transition, since he'll probably get more chances in the open court than in college, where the game will likely be slower. Collier can drive left and right, and I love how he uses his body to dislodge defenders on his way to the rim. Collier plays through bumps and finishes through bigs at a higher level than most other point guards his age. However, he's not just a flat track bully. Collier's strength and speed allows him to pick up the ball far away from the rim and then finesse his way there with float overs, step throughs, and tidy footwork. I love how the Trojans guard paces himself and changes the distance of his steps on his forays into the paint. It's also Collier's aggressiveness that stands out. His motor on this end of the floor is non-stop, and he should get to the free throw line plenty, especially when he's spaced out and given high ball screens. The Wheeler alum looks like a top-tier facilitator as well. I trust that Collier makes the types of reads needed from an NBA point guard, and he already has some of the process down to a T. In the pick and roll, he can turn the corner with ease and touch the paint without problems. Then he can dump it off to the big, hit his roller with good timing, or kick it out accurately to three. Collier's downhill speed sucks in defenders, and then he's capable of finding the open man creatively and precisely. Like with his scoring, his playmaking also comes at multiple speeds and with either or both hands. The biggest question mark surrounding Collier right now is his jumper. It's inconsistent still, make no doubt about that, but he's made big improvements, and I think that in the long term, he will be fine. Collier probably is not going to become a knockdown sniper from everywhere on the floor, but he is a willing pull-up shooter with some range. It might take him a little bit, especially once he's in the league, and defenses are probably going to go under on him at first. However, I would be hesitant to do this all the time. You can dare Collier to shoot, and maybe you're comfortable if he makes a few jumpers, but I also think that you don't want to give him a straight avenue to the rim. He can get there with ease like we mentioned earlier and finish, or at the very least, draw free throws. In his freshman season, I'll be tracking Collier's numbers from three, that means both volume and percentages, but I'm all the way in on him as a John Wall type of prospect, and I'm very excited to watch him at USC. DJ Wagner will become a third-generation NBA player, but before he gets there, he still has an entire season to go with the University of Kentucky. We saw plenty of the Wildcats guard this preseason, in which UK played a pretty competitive schedule that gave us a good glimpse at Wagner's strengths and improvement points ahead of the college year. Like Collier, he's also explosive, but more so rapid than powerful. Wagner also gets tons of paint touches, and although he's pretty cut up, he is much skinnier and narrower than his USC counterpart. The Kentucky guard gets low to the floor with his blow-bys, and he keeps defenders on their toes with his sharp changes of speed and direction. This same idea also applies with Wagner's playmaking, although it's a little less nuanced and it's mostly drive and kick oriented at this stage of his development. In terms of scoring, which is what he does best, DJ has a package of high school playups, and also floaters whenever he has to finish over length. These floaters in particular, as we'll see throughout the year, are a staple of Wagner's game. But you can argue though that he is too reliant on them. That's because Wagner has some difficulty consistently finishing over or through bigger defenders. His burst comes in a straight line rather than when he goes up vertically, so he's mostly a below the rim finisher, and he's not big enough or strong enough to move defenders from their spots. Wagner gets blocked at the basket more often than I'm truly comfortable with, and this was already happening at the high school level, so there is going to be an adjustment needed going forward. This will have to come in college, where the paint might be even more packed and the game is potentially even slower, but also in the NBA, once the level of opposition goes up another notch and the athletic tools that Wagner has to face on defense also increase. This season, monitoring Wagner's attempts at the basket and his conversion rate there will be very important for his draft stock. I really like his ability to get into the paint, but of course, there has to be some end product. Then, Wagner's other scoring is a mixed bag. On one hand, I think he's skilled and shifty enough, especially when it comes to punishing switches against bigs. However, his shot has a bit of a low pickup and a release that's on the slower side, so things can get complicated whenever he gets rushed or challenged. From the perimeter, I'm willing to bet that defenses will go under on him at first, so it's going to be up to Wagner to make them pay for that. Right now, he's still inconsistent as a three-point shooter, so he has to keep growing there even if I do believe in his touch. Then, differently to Isaiah Collier, I do think that Wagner is slightly more versatile off the ball, or at least more willing as a spot-up shooter. Still, that might be a question of roles, since Wagner will have to play next to other ball handlers at Kentucky, like Thierry, Justin Edwards, and Reed Shepherd, whereas Collier will be in charge most of the time at USC. Very quickly, I also want to touch on Wagner's defense. I appreciate his motor on this end, and it's clear to me that he puts in the effort. At the college level, I think he'll be fine for the most part. But once he steps up to the NBA, he is strictly a positional defender. I think only on one guards as well. And I'm not sure that he has the physical or athletic tools to recover whenever he gets beat. Stephon Castle is a smooth, big guard that is headed to UConn, the reigning national champions. Castle's game relies much more on coordination and fluidity than pure burst. In other words, he's more akin to a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander type of ball handler. Right now, I think that this is best reflected in his pull-up game, where Castle is almost always composed and under control. It's challenging for defenses to speed him up, and he likes to rise into his jumper off the bounce since it's easy for the UConn guard to shoot over smaller defenders. At this stage of his development, pulling up off of hang dribbles and hezzies might as well be considered his go-to. However, Castle is much more of a mid-range shooter right now. I think he has the means to be dangerous from 3 too, but I'd like to see his volume increase since he can become a little one-dimensional at times. And while Castle can get his shot off over the top a lot, I think he can work harder to create separation more consistently. Castle is not overly dynamic as a ball handler when it comes to chaining moves together, and he's not explosive, so defenders sometimes find it relatively simple to keep him in front and contest his shot. In particular, I think this will be the case if teams elect to defend the 6'6" Castle with similarly sized wings rather than guards. Looking to his upcoming stint at UConn, I'm also interested in seeing whether Castle plays most of the time on the ball or off the ball. Personally, I like him better with the ball in his hands since he can then create for himself and others. Inching closer to the basket, it's a similar story, as Castle depends on pace and creativity to score at the rim. He won't leave a trail of carnage on his way there, but he will get there. Castle glides into the paint with float overs, crossovers, hesitations, and body fakes. He's pretty creative, and I like how he uses his size here. Like with his pull-up, I also like Castle's poise when he operates out of ball screens. He times himself well, and he understands how to get to his spots. What I'll be looking out for is whether Castle's athletic limitations can be too much when the UConn guard drives into the paint and faces traffic and mismatches. This can still be a challenge for him. Briefly analyzing the other side of the ball, I'm also high on Castle as a defender down the line because of his size. He has the tools to cover more space than other guards do, and even though he's not overly explosive, he's clever and calculated with how he moves. You probably wouldn't put Castle on an Isaiah Collier all game long, but he could do a job, and here and there also make things tough for ball-handling wings. Thierry Serge Darlan is my sleeper in the 2024 NBA Draft. The guard from Central African Republic will play with the G League Ignite this season, though he's still working his way back from a dislocated ankle. Darlan, who until now developed in the NBA's academy in Africa, is super bouncy, but he's not just an athlete. A lot of his upside actually comes from his work off the dribble, where I love his potential as a supersized scoring guard who can put pressure on the paint with his pop, and also hit a variety of pull-up jumpers. Darlan's handle is creative for being so raw overall, and he loves getting into his jump shot on the bounce. The Ignite guard's mechanics will be cleaned up a bit in the future, but he has a quick release, especially when he follows through with a high release point. Darlan has already flashed range from 3 with step backs and side steps, which is very impressive for someone so early in his basketball trajectory. Here, my biggest knock on him might be that he settles too much from the outside at times. With Darlan's tools, he could be getting into the paint even more, and then either forcing the issue at the rim or kicking it out to a teammate. However, he's such a willing shooter that he can fall back on that too much. Come next year, it might be tempting for whichever NBA team drafts Darlan to mold him into more of a wing because of his size, length, and athleticism, but I'm very steadfast that the vision should be to persist with Darlan as an on-ball player with awesome positional size, burst, and playmaking. That playmaking will mean scoring, as we've been seeing, but also facilitating. Most likely, this is where the biggest adjustment curve will come for Darlan, since so far, he's mostly played against competition that also needs a lot of developing, or might be even earlier than him in terms of that. The Central African guard is a long-term prospect, so that's fine and it doesn't concern me, but some patience is going to be needed. They're totally different types of players, but I think Babacar Sané's leap to the G League Ignite showed that the talent and reads needed at this level go up several notches. Broadly speaking, I love the pace that Darlan plays with. He's a solid ball handler who doesn't just drive in a straight line. He understands how to decelerate, speed up, change directions, etc. But I want to see how he fares off against different looks and adjustments, especially in the pick and roll, which is a staple for any NBA offense. At this point, it can still be a struggle when Darlan gets blitzed on ball screens and has to speed up his decision making. His accuracy as well also needs work. Still, I'm very high on the G League Ignite prospect. He's a lottery pick for me right now, and I'm confident that he's going to be a big success story for Africa and the NBA's academy in the continent.